At a family dinner, my daughter-in-law slapped me publicly, shaming my clothes and calling me a beggar, all while my own son watched silently. My cheeks burned, but I simply smiled. She thought she'd won, but that moment awakened a quiet resolve. This is my story. Like, share, and tell me where you are listening from. The air in the grand dining room was thick with the scent of roasted duck, and an underlying tension that Eleanor, at 68, felt acutely. Her heart, already burdened by a lifetime of quiet resilience, pulsed with a familiar ache. This was her home, her ancestral house. Yet tonight, as on many nights since her son Daniel and his wife Candace had moved in 3 years ago, she felt like an unwelcome guest. After Arthur, her beloved husband, had passed, the offer from Daniel and Candace to share the sprawling family home had seemed like a comfort, a shield against the crushing loneliness. Now it felt more like a cage. Tonight's dinner party was one of Candace's usual extravagant affairs, filled with her influential friends and family. Eleanor, ever observant, noticed the meticulous placement cards. Hers, a stark white rectangle, was positioned at the very end of the long mahogany table, furthest from the glittering crystal chandelier and, more significantly, furthest from her son Daniel. It was next to the swinging door that led to the kitchen, a spot usually reserved for the staff, or perhaps an afterthought. She was seated like hired help, a silent observer to the opulent spectacle her daughter-in-law had orchestrated in what was once Eleanor's vibrant family hub. The conversation, a cacophony of polite laughter and boasts, flowed around her like a river, leaving her on a quiet island. Then, Candace's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the din. "Mother Eleanor, are you quite all right down there? You've been so quiet tonight." The feigned concern in her tone was a thin veil for the public address that was about to follow. Eleanor managed a small, tight smile, a practiced response to Candace's subtle digs. "Honestly, my dear," Candace continued, her gaze sweeping across the table, ensuring she had everyone's attention, "it must be quite relaxing, not having a care in the world. 3 years now, isn't it, since you retired to our care? We've certainly taken on quite a lot, haven't we, Daniel?" She paused, her eyes glinting. "Financially speaking, of course. My family finds it remarkable how gracefully you've adapted to not contributing." A gasp was caught in Eleanor's throat. Her cheeks burned, not from anger, but from a deep, mortifying humiliation that spread through her veins like poison ivy. She remembered Arthur, his last agonizing months, the stack of medical bills that had devoured their modest savings, leaving her with little more than the pension that barely covered her personal needs. The house, her house, had been paid off for decades. It was a legacy, not a burden. Yet in Candace's narrative, Eleanor was nothing more than a charity case. Candace wasn't finished. Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Eleanor's simple pressed dress. "And your attire, Mother Eleanor," she scoffed, her voice laced with disdain. "One would think you still shop at thrift stores. My family, they expect a certain level of presentation when they dine with us. You have to understand, we entertain important people." She leaned forward slightly, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing dismissively. "Stop acting like a beggar, Eleanor. You have to dress well to please my family, to reflect the standing of this house." The words struck Eleanor like physical blows, each one chipping away at her dignity. She felt her hands trembling beneath the table, clutching the fabric of her worn dress. She tried to summon a reply, anything, but her voice failed her. The silence around the table was suddenly deafening, a vacuum created by Candace's audacity. Then, with a sudden, swift motion, Candace's hand rose and descended. A sharp crack echoing through the room. A searing pain bloomed on Eleanor's left cheek. The shock of it resonated through her entire body, numbing her from the tips of her toes to the roots of her silver hair. For a moment she heard nothing, saw nothing but the blur of Candace's retreating hand. Then a nervous titter rippled through the guests, quickly morphing into an uncomfortable, almost apologetic laughter. Candace's sister, Michelle, seated beside her, clapped her hands together once, a sharp, approving sound. Eleanor slowly turned her gaze toward Daniel, her son. His eyes were fixed on his wineglass, his jaw tight. He took a slow, deliberate sip, a silent testament to his complicity, his abandonment. The pain of his inaction was sharper than the sting on her cheek. Despite her legs threatening to buckle, Eleanor found a strength she didn't know she possessed. A quiet determination settled over her features. She looked directly at Candace, her eyes clear, devoid of the tears that threatened to well. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "You're absolutely right, Candace," she said, her voice steady, surprisingly calm. The words, though seemingly agreeable, carried an edge that only she could discern. "I have been acting inappropriately." She straightened her shoulders, ignoring the throbbing pain on her cheek, ignoring the lingering stares of the guests. "I should dress better. I should contribute more to this household." With that, Eleanor pushed her chair back, the scrape of wood against the polished floor, a loud punctuation mark in the stunned silence. She walked, not out of the room, but toward the kitchen, her head held high, her smile still in place. She felt Candace's confused yet smug gaze on her back, heard her daughter-in-law mutter under her breath, "Well, that was easier than I expected." In the cool, sterile confines of the kitchen, the smile vanished. Her hand instinctively rose to her throbbing left cheek, the warmth of the insult still burning her skin. The words, the slap, Daniel's silence, it all coalesced into a fierce resolve. This was not the end. This was a beginning. Her gaze fell on a small, ornate key sitting innocently on a hook by the pantry door. Arthur's key, the one to his study, untouched since his passing, a room she hadn't dared to enter, filled with memories and secrets she had long avoided. Now it felt like the only place she needed to be. Everything was about to change. The sting on Eleanor's cheek was a phantom limb, a constant reminder of the previous night's humiliation. She had barely slept, the image of Candace's sneering face and Daniel's averted gaze replaying endlessly in her mind. But beneath the raw pain, a cold fire had been kindled. Arthur's key, clutched in her hand, felt heavier than lead, yet it was also a promise. The next morning dawned with a deceptive quiet. Eleanor made her way to the kitchen, feigning a normalcy she didn't feel. She watched as Daniel, impeccably dressed for work, kissed Candace goodbye. Candace, still in her silk robe, lingered over her coffee, scrolling through her phone, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. Eleanor waited, her patience a taut wire. Finally, Candace, after making a few calls, announced her departure for a yoga class and a lavish brunch with friends. The moment the front door clicked shut, Eleanor felt a wave of relief wash over her. The house, for now, was hers. Her footsteps, usually slow and deliberate, were now quick, purposeful, as she ascended the grand staircase. She gripped the cold brass key tighter, Arthur's study, a room Candace had repeatedly suggested should be repurposed, transformed into a walk-in closet for her ever-expanding wardrobe, or perhaps a chic home office. Each suggestion had been a subtle encroachment, a further erasure of Arthur's memory from their shared home. But Eleanor had stubbornly resisted, clinging to this one sanctuary, however neglected. Reaching the study door, her fingers trembled slightly as she inserted the old brass key into the lock. The click was surprisingly loud in the silent house, a sound of liberation. The door swung open, revealing the room exactly as Arthur had left it 3 years ago. The scent of old books, pipe tobacco, and Arthur's subtle cologne still lingered, a ghost of his presence. His leather-bound books lined the shelves. His large oak desk was piled with half-finished crosswords and a well-loved fountain pen. In his comfortable armchair, with its worn armrests, seemed to beckon her. A wave of bittersweet nostalgia washed over Eleanor, momentarily eclipsing her mission. She remembered one of Arthur's last lucid weeks, a quiet afternoon spent in this very room. He had pointed to a loose floorboard behind his leather armchair, a playful twinkle in his eye, a hint of a secret, a legacy. "Just in case, my love," he had whispered, his voice raspy. "There's always a rainy day, and sometimes you need your own umbrella." At the time, Eleanor had dismissed it as one of his whimsical turns of phrase, a loving reassurance from a dying man. Now the memory was a beacon. Eleanor moved the heavy armchair, revealing the subtly discolored wood of the floorboards. Her fingers probed, searching, until they found the tiny latch Arthur had described. With a soft click, a section of the floorboard lifted. Inside the cavity, nestled snugly, was a small, heavy metal fireproof box. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she lifted it out. the cold metal a sharp contrast to her trembling hands. The box wasn't locked. Inside, a meticulously organized stack of documents awaited her. She pulled them out one by one, her eyes widening with each revelation. Bank statements from accounts she didn't recognize, sophisticated investment portfolios with names of companies she'd only heard on the news, and property deeds. Her breath hitched. The deeds confirmed ownership of not one but two downtown rental buildings, prime real estate, located in the bustling heart of the city. Each document clearly stated a monthly income of $3,000, $6,000 a month, $72,000 a year. Her mind reeled. This income had been flowing in for years, completely unbeknownst to her. But the most shocking document lay at the bottom, crisp and official. A trust fund established 15 years prior. Eleanor's name was prominently displayed as the sole beneficiary. Her eyes scanned the balance. $2.7 million. The numbers swam before her eyes. Eleanor sank onto the edge of Arthur's armchair. The documents scattered around her on the floor. She had been living like a charity case, enduring Candace's snide remarks and financial accusations while sitting on a fortune. She, Eleanor, was significantly wealthier than Candace and Daniel, whose carefully curated facade of prosperity was largely built on debt and ambition. The irony was a bitter yet strangely empowering taste in her mouth. Beneath the stack of official papers, a single folded sheet of paper caught her eye. Arthur's familiar handwriting. A letter. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. I always worried about you, my sweet, trusting wife. You have such a kind heart, and sometimes that makes you vulnerable. I saw how Daniel changed when he married Candace, how their ambitions grew, how their eyes glazed over at the mention of money. I knew if they thought you had any significant assets, they would pressure you, perhaps even manipulate you, to gain access. This money, these investments, they are yours alone. I worked hard. I planned carefully, not just for our future, but for your future, for the life you deserve, free from anyone who would take advantage of your kind heart. Use it wisely or extravagantly, as you see fit. Live your life, my love. Truly live." Tears, hot and fast, finally tracked paths down her cheeks, but these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of profound love, of astonishment, and of a dawning, fierce joy. Arthur, ever her protector, had been protecting her even from beyond the grave. The letter also contained contact information for Jonathan Harrison, his lawyer, a man Eleanor faintly remembered Arthur mentioning years ago. He had been managing everything, quietly and efficiently, just as Arthur had intended. A sudden sound from downstairs startled Eleanor. Footsteps, then the distinctive jingle of keys. Candace. She must have forgotten something, or perhaps her brunch plans had changed. Panic flared. Eleanor quickly, almost frantically, began to return the documents to the fireproof box, sliding the floorboard back into place. She replaced the armchair, her movements swift and silent. From the hallway, she heard Candace's voice, loud and clear, on the phone. "You won't believe it, Michelle. She actually thanked me for embarrassing her last night. Said I was right. I think I finally got through to her." Candace's voice was triumphant, smug. "Honestly, it's about time she understood her place. Now we just need to figure out where she can find somewhere else to live." A pause. No, you still need her Social Security money. It's not much, but every little bit helps us stay afloat with these bills." Eleanor stood frozen, her hand still resting on the study door handle. The words, dripping with contempt, confirmed everything. They wanted her out, yet they still wanted her meager pension. The cold fire in her heart intensified, burning away the last vestiges of hurt. Arthur's letter, his legacy, was not just about wealth. It was about freedom. And Eleanor, at 68, was finally ready to claim it. The sound of Candace's voice, a smug echo of her contempt, faded as she finally left the house. Eleanor, her heart still thrumming with a mixture of shock and righteous anger, crept back into Arthur's study. This time she didn't just close the door, she locked it. The click of the mechanism, a deliberate act of claiming this space, this secret. With a newfound resolve that surprised even herself, she retrieved Arthur's letter and dialed the number for Mr. Harrison's office. A pleasant, professional voice answered on the third ring. "Jonathan Harrison and Associates. How may I help you?" "My name is Eleanor Morrison," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, betraying none of the turmoil swirling within her. "I believe Mr. Harrison is expecting my call." There was a slight pause on the other end, then a burst of genuine excitement. "Mrs. Morrison, oh my goodness! Mr. Harrison has been expecting your call for nearly 3 years now. He will be absolutely thrilled. Please, hold for a moment while I put you through." Eleanor leaned against Arthur's sturdy desk, the worn wood a solid anchor beneath her trembling hand. 3 years. 3 years she had been living under Candace and Daniel's thumb, enduring their calculated slights and financial abuse, while this man, a complete stranger, had been quietly waiting for her to discover the truth. It was a bizarre, almost cinematic twist of fate. A moment later, a different voice, deeper and more authoritative, came on the line. "Mrs. Morrison, Jonathan Harrison here. It's an immense pleasure to finally speak with you. I trust you found Arthur's instructions?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison," Eleanor replied, her voice gaining confidence with each word. "I did. I'd like to schedule a meeting as soon as possible." "Of course. My calendar is fairly open this afternoon. Would 2 o'clock work for you?" he offered, his tone kind and understanding. "Perfectly," Eleanor confirmed. "Excellent. Just bring a form of identification, Mrs. Morrison, so we can verify your identity and get all your accounts immediately accessible. Arthur was very clear that everything should be ready for you the moment you step forward." "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'll be there." As she hung up the phone, a plan began to form in Eleanor's mind. Candace would be out for hours, indulging in her usual expensive brunch and shopping spree. Eleanor would tell her she was going grocery shopping, a mundane errand that typically occupied Eleanor for a significant portion of the day. It wouldn't arouse any suspicion. She thought back over the past 3 years, a tapestry woven with threads of quiet gratitude and growing unease. She had convinced herself that Candace's cruel remarks, Daniel's increasing distance, their subtle manipulations, were a fair trade for the security of staying in her beloved home. She had believed herself indebted to them, a burden they reluctantly carried. The truth, now glaringly apparent, painted a far different picture. They weren't just taking advantage of her, they were actively impoverishing her, while living off a facade of wealth that was, ironically, thinner than her own hidden fortune. The realization was a sharp, clarifying blow. Eleanor dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant dress, a stark contrast to the thrift store attire Candace had mocked. As she was about to leave the study, she heard Candace's voice again, emanating from the kitchen. She must have returned for another item, or perhaps just to gloat. "Yes, I know, it's thrilling," Candace was saying into her phone, her voice pitched high with excitement. "I'm heading out now to celebrate, finally taking control of the household dynamics. It feels so good to put her in her place." Eleanor paused, her hand on the doorknob, listening to the self-congratulatory chatter that confirmed Candace's belief in her own triumph. "I'm thinking a new designer handbag, perhaps a little something for Daniel too. We deserve it after putting up with her for so long." Eleanor's lips tightened. Taking control? Candace had no idea. Jonathan Harrison was not the elderly, stoic lawyer Eleanor had envisioned. He was a man in his early 50s, with kind, intelligent eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a handshake that was warm and firm. His office, while professional, felt welcoming, not intimidating. "Mrs. Morrison," he began, gesturing for her to sit in a plush leather chair opposite his desk. Arthur was a remarkable man, one of the most careful financial planners I've ever had the privilege to work with. He explained how Arthur, even in his 20s, had started investing small amounts from his first paychecks, reinvesting every dividend, every small gain. He'd used a modest inheritance from his own grandmother, not for frivolous spending, but to purchase his first rental property, one of the downtown buildings Eleanor now owned. Over 40 years, through astute observations and careful, consistent decisions, Arthur had built a formidable portfolio, brick by meticulous brick. He had a genius for quiet, steady growth, avoiding the flashy, risky investments that often led to ruin. Mr. Harrison placed a crisp, official-looking document on the desk. "As of yesterday, Mrs. Morrison," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "your accessible assets, including the trust fund and all managed investments, total an astonishing $3.1 million. Eleanor's breath caught. $3.1 million. The trust fund alone had grown by nearly $400,000 since Arthur's passing, a testament to his foresight and Mr. Harrison's diligent management. The consistent rental income from the two buildings, $6,000 a month, had also contributed significantly to the burgeoning sum. Arthur's instructions were very clear, Mr. Harrison continued, leaning back in his chair. He wanted you to have complete and total control. He told me to wait until you felt ready, until you contacted me, and then to give you everything you needed to move forward with your life, exactly as you wished." He looked at her, his kind eyes searching hers. "So, Mrs. Morrison, are you ready?" A fierce, unwavering certainty bloomed in Eleanor's chest, the phantom sting on her cheek, the echo of Candace's smug voice, the years of quiet suffering. They all coalesced into this single powerful moment. "I'm ready now, Mr. Harrison," she declared, her voice strong and unwavering. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor meticulously reviewed every single account, every investment portfolio, every property detail. Mr. Harrison patiently explained the intricacies of each asset, the history of its growth, the current market value. She learned that the $6,000 monthly from the rental buildings was being quietly deposited into a separate account she never knew existed, managed by a professional property company that handled everything from tenant screening to maintenance. Arthur had truly thought of everything. As she absorbed the sheer scale of her unexpected wealth, a plan far more ambitious and liberating than any mere grocery run began to solidify in her mind. Candace and Daniel had underestimated her. They had mistaken her kindness for weakness, her silence for ignorance. But Arthur's quiet legacy had armed her, not just with millions of dollars, but with the power to reclaim her life. "Mr. Harrison," Eleanor began, a glint in her eye that surprised even herself, "I want to transfer a substantial sum to my personal checking account. Immediately." Jonathan Harrison nodded, his expression unreadable, but his pen poised. "Of course, Mrs. Morrison. What amount would you like to start with?" Eleanor thought of Candace's contemptuous words, her sneer about thrift store clothes. A slow smile spread across her face. $100,000 to start, she declared, her voice firm. It felt audacious, thrilling. It was more money than she had seen in her checking account in her entire life, more than her annual income. Yet Mr. Harrison simply nodded, processing the request without a flicker of surprise. He was clearly accustomed to clients with fortunes far exceeding hers. "And for convenience," he added smoothly, "would you like me to arrange for a credit card with a substantial limit? It can be linked directly to your trust account for seamless spending, should you wish." Eleanor paused for a moment, considering. A credit card. She had used them sparingly throughout her life, always paying them off in full each month. The idea of one with a substantial limit felt like stepping into a different universe. But then she thought of Candace's designer bags, her endless shopping sprees. "Why not?" she thought. "It's my money." "Yes, Mr. Harrison, that would be most helpful." By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Eleanor walked out of the downtown bank, an extension of Mr. Harrison's office, with a new sleek black credit card nestled in her wallet and a checkbook for her newly flushed checking account. The crisp paper and the weight of the card in her hand felt immensely powerful, a tangible manifestation of her newfound freedom. The world seemed to shimmer with possibility. Her first destination was Nordstrom, a store she had admired from a distance but rarely entered. Inside, the elegant displays and hushed atmosphere were a stark contrast to her usual discount stores. She requested a personal shopper, and a young woman named Sarah with a keen eye and a warm smile appeared. Eleanor, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, informed Sarah that she was looking for a complete wardrobe refresh, no budget. Sarah, a seasoned professional, immediately recognized this was no ordinary afternoon client. Eleanor, guided by Sarah, stepped into a world of luxurious fabrics and impeccable tailoring. She tried on a range of elegant dresses, sophisticated suits, and effortlessly chic casual wear. Each piece she donned, from a cashmere sweater to a silk blouse, cost more than her previous annual clothing budget, yet she felt no guilt. only a growing sense of exhilaration. Sarah held up an $800 navy silk dress, its fabric flowing like water. "This, Mrs. Morrison, is exquisite," she remarked, her voice hushed with genuine admiration. "It's sophisticated but not stuffy. It drapes beautifully, flatters your figure, and with the right accessories, it could work for anything. A dinner party, a formal event, even a gallery opening." Eleanor gazed at her reflection. The dress was perfect. It hugged her curves in all the right places, making her feel graceful and confident. She purchased the dress along with matching suede pumps, a chic leather handbag, delicate pearl earrings, and several other stunning outfits, including a striking black cocktail dress that made her feel, for the first time in years, truly beautiful and powerful. Next, she visited a jewelry store, one she remembered Arthur frequenting, the very place where he had bought her engagement ring all those decades ago. Mr. Wong, the kindly, silver-haired owner, greeted her like a long-lost friend. "Mrs. Morrison, it's been too long. How may I help you today?" Eleanor smiled. "I'm looking for a few pieces to celebrate a new chapter, Mr. Wong." She allowed him to guide her, selecting a pair of lustrous pearl earrings that complemented her new wardrobe, an expensive, elegant watch that gleamed on her wrist, and a delicate diamond pendant necklace that caught the light with every movement. Each piece was an investment, a symbol of the life she was about to reclaim. Her final and perhaps most symbolic purchase was at Candace's exclusive salon. Eleanor had always bypassed it, deeming it an unnecessary extravagance. But tonight it felt essential. A young stylist named Ashley, with edgy pink streaks in her hair and a dazzling smile, took Eleanor under her wing for a complete makeover: hair, makeup, and nails. Ashley, with a skilled eye, transformed Eleanor. She gave her subtle, warm highlights that brightened her face, a flattering new cut that framed her features, taking years off her appearance without making her look desperate or unnatural. The makeup was light, enhancing her natural beauty, and her nails were perfectly manicured and painted a soft, elegant rose. As Ashley worked, pampering her, Eleanor thought of Arthur. He had always loved to see her happy, loved to see her take care of herself. He would have cherished seeing her indulge in such self-care after years of practicality, of putting everyone else first. Driving home in her sensible Honda Civic by 7 o'clock, Eleanor glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was utterly transformed. No longer a timid, graying widow, but an elegant, prosperous woman, her eyes sparkling with a newfound confidence. The journey had just begun. She considered revealing her hand that very night, but a lingering thought made her pause. She had overheard more of Candace and Daniel's phone conversations over the past few days. Their confident facade was crumbling. Maxed out credit cards, mounting debts, desperate attempts to secure loans. They were teetering on the edge of financial ruin. The thought solidified her decision. The reveal would be more impactful, more satisfying when their desperation was at its peak. Patience, Arthur had always taught her, was a virtue, and now it was her greatest weapon. If you're enjoying this journey of transformation and quiet revenge, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a single part of what happens next. The sensible Honda Civic idled in the driveway. Eleanor sat for a moment, gazing at the house she and Arthur had bought 35 years ago. The sprawling Victorian, with its manicured garden and welcoming porch, was a silent testament to their love and hard work. Arthur's will, confirmed by Mr. Hamilton, left no doubt. The house, now valued at a conservative $800,000, was entirely hers. Not Daniel's, not Candace's, hers. From inside, she heard Candace's voice, raised in triumphant tones, still on the phone with her sister. "Michelle, you wouldn't believe it, Michelle, but that little chat at the dinner party really worked wonders. She actually seemed grateful when I put her in her place. Daniel thinks she's finally out looking for a job, or maybe a cheap apartment. Imagine. We'll finally have some space to breathe, and maybe even that walk-in closet I've been dreaming of." Eleanor's lips curled into a silent, knowing smile. She quietly exited her car, her new clothes and shimmering jewelry hidden beneath a simple trench coat she'd bought at Nordstrom. She crept up to her bedroom, bypassing the kitchen, where Candace still chattered away, oblivious. The next day, Eleanor mused, she would begin to prove them utterly, gloriously wrong. That night, she didn't just revisit Arthur's study to admire her new purchases, carefully hung in the back of her closet, away from prying eyes. She used the privacy of the room and the secure, encrypted phone Mr. Harrison had provided to make calls. She spoke to the property management company about her rental buildings, confirming every detail, every deposit. She explored legal options, consulting with Mr. Harrison about her rights regarding her property, her inheritance, and the unwelcome guests residing under her roof. Every action was meticulous, deliberate. For the next 2 weeks, Eleanor meticulously played the part of the defeated woman. She wore her old, worn clothes, spoke softly, and moved with a deference that she knew Candace and Daniel mistook for submission. Her new wardrobe remained hidden, a secret weapon waiting for the opportune moment. Her grocery shopping trips became her cover for strategic excursions. She met with contractors, not to renovate Daniel and Candace's current living space, but to gather quotes for the discreet and tasteful refurbishing of her own home once it was hers again. She consulted with additional financial advisors, comparing strategies, solidifying her plans for managing her newfound wealth. And with a growing sense of anticipation, she discreetly viewed luxury condominiums, imagining a future where she had complete autonomy and privacy. All the while, she continued to watch and listen. The financial struggles that had seemed like distant rumors now revealed themselves in excruciating detail. Daniel, desperate to placate Candace and maintain their lavish lifestyle, had borrowed $25,000 from his retirement account, a move that made Eleanor's heart ache for the naive boy he once was. The money, she soon discovered, had immediately vanished into the black hole of Candace's maxed-out credit card debt. The hushed, anxious conversations after dinner became routine. Candace's BM, Eleanor overheard, was 3 months behind on payments. They constantly discussed consolidation loans, second mortgage, and other desperate measures to keep their precarious financial house from collapsing. The stress lines on Daniel's face deepened daily, while Candace's temper grew shorter, her demands louder. Eleanor, however, remained a silent, observant presence, knitting quietly in the corner, her true thoughts hidden behind a placid facade. The perfect opportunity arose when Candace, with an air of grandiosity, announced another dinner party. It was scheduled for the upcoming Saturday, planned to be even bigger, more extravagant than the last. Candace, despite her burgeoning debt, insisted on cooking everything herself, a performative display of domesticity meant to impress her circle. She turned to Eleanor, her smile saccharine sweet. "And of course, Mother Eleanor will help with the preparation and serving, won't you, dear? You always were so good at keeping things organized in the kitchen." Eleanor, her heart thrumming with a quiet resolve, met Candace's gaze. "Of course, Candace," she replied, her voice calm and agreeable. "I'd be delighted to help," Candace beamed, oblivious to the deeper meaning behind Eleanor's compliance. "Excellent. I want this evening to be perfect. We have some exciting news to announce." She shot a significant look at Daniel, who merely shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding Eleanor's gaze entirely. Later that evening, after Candace had retreated to her lavish bath, Eleanor lingered in the living room pretending to read. She heard Daniel's strained voice from the adjoining study, where he was on the phone. "You haven't told her about the house yet. How are we going to do this?" Candace's voice, hushed but sharp, replied, "Relax, Daniel. I have a plan. We'll wait until after the party. The announcement will set the stage. Then we'll tell her we need to sell the house to pay off our overwhelming debts. She'll have no choice but to agree. It's for the family, after all." Eleanor's blood ran cold, then boiled with a quiet fury. Her house, their overwhelming debts, the audacity was breathtaking. Candace's exciting news was clearly related to their desperate need for money, and Eleanor, along with her home, was to be their unwitting solution. She closed her eyes, picturing Arthur's kind face, hearing his words. "This money is yours alone. Use it to live the life you deserve, free from anyone who would take advantage of your kind heart." The time for playing the defeated woman was almost over. The time for Eleanor's master plan to unfold was drawing near. Saturday night would be an evening Candace and Daniel would never forget. Eleanor's heart, usually a steady rhythm, now raced with a furious beat. The casual cruelty of Candace's words echoed in her mind. "We'll wait until after the party. Tell her we need to sell the house." It wasn't just about forcing her out. It was about taking her home, the sanctuary she and Arthur had built together over 35 years of shared laughter, quiet evenings, and enduring love. The thought was a searing brand on her soul. She heard Daniel's voice, a flicker of genuine concern breaking through his usual complacency. But she doesn't have anywhere to go. Candace's reply was dismissive, chillingly callous. She has Social Security. She'll be fine. She can get a small apartment, live simply. It's what she's always done, hasn't she? Her voice hardened, laced with desperation. Daniel, we don't have a choice. If we don't sell this house and use the equity to pay off our debts, we're going to lose everything. Everything. Our reputation, our lifestyle, it all depends on this. The words sealed Eleanor's resolve. The time for subtlety was over. The time for the master plan to unfold was now. The next morning, before Candace and Daniel had even stirred from their luxurious slumber, Eleanor was on the phone with Mr. Harrison. Her voice was calm but firm, vibrating with a new authority. Mr. Harrison, I need to accelerate our timeline. I want to make some significant changes before this weekend. Of course, Mrs. Morrison, he replied, his voice reassuring. What can I do for you? First, Eleanor stated, meticulously outlining her instructions, I want to transfer the title of the house into an irrevocable trust. Immediately. I need to ensure that no one, absolutely no one, can sell or mortgage this property without my explicit consent. The thought of Candace and Daniel even attempting to leverage her home for their reckless spending was intolerable. Consider it done, Mrs. Morrison. I can have the paperwork drawn up and filed by end of day. It will effectively put your house beyond their reach. Secondly, she continued, a mischievous glint in her eye, I would like to purchase a new car. Something appropriate for a woman of means. A statement, perhaps. Mr. Harrison chuckled softly. I understand completely. Do you have a make and model in mind, or would you like my assistant to provide you with some options? I've already done my research, Eleanor replied, thinking of the sleek silver sedan she'd admired. A Mercedes, the E-Class sedan. Cash purchase, please. Excellent choice. I'll make the arrangements immediately. Finally, Esther, Eleanor concluded, her voice dropping slightly, a hint of theatricality entering her tone. I have a rather dramatic purchase scheduled for Saturday morning. Something I believe will send a very clear message. I'll handle the specifics, but I wanted you to be aware. Mr. Harrison's curiosity was piqued. A dramatic purchase? I look forward to hearing about it, Mrs. Morrison. By Friday afternoon, everything was meticulously in place. The house, her beloved home, was legally secured in her irrevocable trust, a fortress against Candace and Daniel's grasping hands. And sitting in the driveway, gleaming under the late afternoon sun, was a beautiful brand new silver Mercedes sedan, purchased outright with cash. Eleanor felt a quiet thrill every time she glanced out the window. She spent Friday evening in her familiar role, the subdued mother-in-law, helping Candace with the last-minute dinner party preparations. She chopped vegetables, polished silverware, and arranged flowers, all the while listening to Candace's excited chatter about the flawless party, the important guests, and the exciting news she planned to announce. This party is going to change everything for us, Mother Eleanor, Candace declared, her eyes sparkling with ambition as she sampled a canapé. Eleanor smiled, a genuine private smile. You're absolutely right, Candace, she murmured. It truly is, but not in the way Candace imagined. Saturday morning arrived, gray and drizzling, the weather mirroring the somber resolve that had settled deep within Eleanor. Candace, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, rushed around in a frenzy of last-minute preparations. The aroma of roasting meats and baking pastries filled the house, a deceptive prelude to the chaos that was about to unfold. At precisely 10 o'clock a.m., a large delivery truck rumbled down their quiet street and pulled into the driveway, its brakes hissing loudly. Eleanor, stirring her tea in the kitchen, casually glanced out the window. A delivery man, clipboard in hand, approached the front door. Mrs. Morrison, he asked as Eleanor opened it. Before Eleanor could reply, a frowning Candace, her hair in rollers and her face smeared with flour, appeared from the kitchen. Furniture? Mother Eleanor, what did you order? Her voice was sharp, accusatory. She had never known Eleanor to spend money on anything beyond absolute necessities. Eleanor met her gaze, a serene expression on her face. "Just a few things to make the house more comfortable, dear," she replied, her voice soft, enjoying the flicker of confusion in Candace's eyes. Then the true spectacle began. Piece after piece of exquisite, expensive furniture began to fill the house. First, a magnificent, rich mahogany dining set, polished to a mirror sheen, was carefully placed in the formal dining room, replacing Candace's less distinguished, though still expensive, set. Then, a plush, soft leather living room ensemble arrived, displacing the modern, somewhat stark furniture Candace had chosen. Art pieces, carefully selected by Eleanor from a prestigious gallery, were unveiled and hung on the walls, each delivery widening Candace's already shocked mouth. Eleanor watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction, a silent, powerful transformation taking place not just in her home but within herself. The stage was set. Candace finally managed to find her voice, her tone a strangled whisper. Her eyes darted from the gleaming mahogany dining table to the sumptuous leather sofas, her mind clearly struggling to process the scene. "Mother Eleanor, where did you get the money for this? All this furniture? And that car outside?" Eleanor, composed and serene, merely smiled. "Oh, I saved up, dear, over the years." The lie was delivered with such conviction that for a split second, Candace almost believed it. Just then, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, its engine cutting out with a sigh. He emerged, visibly tired from a long week, but his exhaustion quickly gave way to utter disbelief. His gaze fell upon the new silver Mercedes, then to the delivery truck pulling away, before sweeping over the dramatically transformed interior of his family home. His jaw dropped. "Mom?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion and alarm. "What's going on here?" Eleanor, now comfortably seated in one of her new soft leather armchairs, her posture regal, regarded her son and daughter-in-law. She was still in her simple house dress, a deliberate choice to emphasize that the transformation was not about her outward appearance, but about her inner power. "Oh, Daniel," she said, her voice calm, almost placid. "I decided it was time to make some improvements to the house. It's been rather neglected, wouldn't you agree?" Candace, her face a mask of escalating panic, rushed forward, grabbing Daniel's arm. "Daniel, she's bought thousands of dollars worth of furniture, exquisite pieces, and the car, a Mercedes. She won't tell me where she got the money." Her voice was frantic, a stark contrast to Eleanor's quiet composure. Eleanor gestured for them to sit on the other new leather sofa, maintaining her placid smile. "Please sit. There are some things we need to discuss before your guests arrive." She paused, letting the silence stretch, allowing her words to sink in. "I know you've been planning to sell the house, haven't you? To pay off your debts and force me into some senior housing facility." Candace's face went utterly white, all color draining from it as if someone had pulled a plug. Daniel looked visibly ill, his eyes darting between his mother and his wife, a sick realization dawning on his face. He knew his mother was usually acutely aware of things, but he never expected her to have overheard their most desperate, private conversations. Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a quiet, steel-edged authority. "What you don't know, what you clearly failed to investigate, is that this house belongs to me completely and irrevocably. As of yesterday morning, the title was transferred into an irrevocable trust. You cannot sell it, you cannot mortgage it, and you certainly cannot use it as collateral for your reckless spending." Candace stammered, her voice thin and high-pitched. "That's impossible. We live here. We pay the—" Eleanor interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "You pay nothing, Candace. I own this house outright. I always have. I own the Mercedes in the driveway, and I own every single piece of furniture that was delivered here today. You are living in my home, benefiting from my property, and attempting to plot my eviction from it." She paused, letting the full weight of her words settle. "In 6 hours, your 20 guests will begin to arrive, and by the end of this evening, I will ensure that every single one of them understands exactly how things work in this household." Just then, the doorbell chimed, a cheerful sound that felt profoundly jarring in the tense silence. It was the first guest. "Ma." Eleanor rose from her armchair, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "If you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for dinner." She ascended the stairs, leaving behind a stunned, terrified Daniel and Candace. In the quiet sanctity of her bedroom, she opened her closet. The simple house dress was discarded, replaced by the stunning navy silk dress, its fabric flowing like liquid around her. She fastened the pearl earrings, secured the delicate diamond pendant, and clasped the expensive gold watch around her wrist. Ashley's masterful makeup highlighted her features, and her new hairstyle framed her face perfectly. She looked in the mirror, no longer just Eleanor, but Eleanor Morrison, a woman of means, of power, and of quiet resolve. As she descended the grand staircase, a hush fell over the living room. The first few guests, already chatting nervously with a visibly flustered Candace and a pale Daniel, stopped mid-sentence. Eleanor's elegance commanded instant attention. She was transformed, radiant, utterly unlike the quiet, unassuming figure they were used to. Mrs. Davies, a longtime family friend, gasped, "Eleanor, is that really you? My goodness, you look absolutely magnificent." Eleanor offered a graceful, serene smile. "It is indeed, Helen. It's wonderful to see you all." Candace, still in her cooking clothes, a flour smudge on her cheek, stood frozen by the bar cart, a half-poured drink forgotten in her hand. Next to Eleanor's radiant appearance, Candace looked precisely like what she usually made Eleanor feel like, the hired help. At dinner, Eleanor walked straight to the head of the newly installed mahogany table, the seat Candace usually occupied, a position of honor and authority. She sat down, coolly surveying the room. Candace, still reeling, could only stammer a protest. "Mother Eleanor, that's my—" Eleanor cut her off with a sweet, almost imperceptible smile. "Candace, dear, would you be so kind as to serve the first course? I believe the soup is ready." The command in her voice was undeniable, forcing Candace to retreat to the kitchen, utterly humiliated. Throughout the dinner, Eleanor charmed her guests, her conversation sparkling, her wit sharp. She casually mentioned her plans for renovating the master suite and perhaps adding a conservatory. Victoria, a particularly gossipy guest, raised an eyebrow. "Eleanor, my dear, that sounds incredibly expensive. Are you sure?" Eleanor simply smiled, taking a delicate sip of wine. "Oh, when you own the house outright, these things become much more manageable, wouldn't you agree?" Her gaze flickered to Candace and Daniel, a subtle, devastating implication hanging in the air. The looks on their faces were priceless. The game, for Eleanor, had truly begun. Candace's soup spoon clattered against her bowl, sending a splash of bisque onto the freshly polished mahogany. She quickly recovered, forcing a strained smile, but the shift in dynamics was evident to everyone. The air, once light with chatter, was now thick with an unspoken tension, an undercurrent of curiosity about the newly assertive Eleanor. Victoria, never one to shy away from directness, finally voiced the question that hung in the air like a heavy fog. "Eleanor, my dear, forgive me for being so direct, but at Candace's last dinner party, you seemed rather—" Eleanor completed her sentence, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the strained silence. "I seemed poor, Victoria. I seemed dependent on Daniel and Candace's charity. I seemed like a burden they were graciously tolerating." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the table, meeting the eyes of each guest. "And that," she concluded with chilling clarity, her eyes finally resting on Candace, "is exactly how they wanted me to seem." Candace's already pale face drained of the last vestige of color. Rising slowly from the head of the table, Eleanor walked to a nearby sideboard. From a new leather portfolio, she extracted a stack of documents. Her movements were deliberate, each action imbued with a quiet power. She returned to the table and, with a flourish, presented the contents. Crisp bank statements, official property deeds, and sophisticated investment summaries. "These documents," she announced, her voice strong and unwavering, "show assets totaling just over $3 million, not including this house, which, as I mentioned, I own free and clear." A collective gasp rippled around the table. Whispers erupted, but Eleanor raised a hand, silencing them with a look. Then her voice dropped slightly, taking on a tone of grim revelation. "And yet my son Daniel and his wife Candace, who so generously took me in, who have been struggling so greatly to maintain their lifestyle, are currently mired in approximately $87,000 of debt, maxed out credit cards, a delinquent luxury car payment, and a significant loan taken from Daniel's retirement fund. Daniel's wine glass, forgotten in his trembling hand, slipped through his fingers. It hit the polished floor with a sickening shatter, sending shards of crystal and crimson wine splashing across the new rug. He didn't even flinch, his eyes fixed on his mother, a look of profound horror on his face. Eleanor ignored the broken glass, her gaze unwavering. In fact, she continued, I overheard their plans just last night. They intended to wait until after this very party, then inform me that they needed to sell my house, to pay off their overwhelming debts. Their plan was to then move me into senior housing, relying on my meager Social Security payments for my care. The room was utterly silent, save for a choked sob that escaped Candace's lips. The guests exchanged shocked glances, their polite smiles replaced by expressions of disbelief and disgust. The ultimate blow, however, was yet to come. Eleanor's voice was now laced with a cold, almost surgical precision. For the past 3 years, she revealed, I have been sending Daniel and Candace $1,000 every single month from one of my accounts. I believed I was helping them, that I was contributing my fair share to this household, that I was helping them support me, as they so often reminded me. She paused, letting the bitter irony hang in the air. They weren't supporting me, Eleanor stated, her eyes burning with a chilling clarity. I was supporting them. At this, Candace broke into uncontrolled, hysterical sobs, burying her face in her hands. Her perfectly constructed facade had crumbled into a heap of lies and shame. Daniel, finally finding his voice, croaked, Mom, I didn't know about the money. Dad never told me. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of betrayal and desperation. Eleanor met his gaze, her heart aching for the son she had lost, but her resolve unshakable. Your father, Daniel, she replied, her voice tinged with a quiet sadness, protected these assets for exactly this reason. He knew. She turned back to the stunned guests, her voice regaining its earlier strength. So, in light of these revelations, I have made some decisions. Effective immediately, the monthly financial assistance to Daniel and Candace ends. And as for their living arrangements, she paused, her gaze sweeping over her son and daughter-in-law, who now looked like 2 children caught in a heinous lie. Daniel and Candace have 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. They are no longer welcome in my home. As she delivered the ultimatum, a profound sense of liberation washed over Eleanor. The years of quiet suffering, the humiliation, the manipulation, it all culminated in this moment of reclaiming her dignity. She rose, her gaze unwavering, and walked towards the dining room door, her head held high. As she passed Candace's chair, the sobbing woman still hunched over, Eleanor paused. She leaned down, her voice a soft, deadly whisper audible only to Candace. Oh, and Candace, Eleanor murmured, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. Thank you for the slap. It was exactly the wake-up call I needed. With that, Eleanor walked out of the dining room, leaving 20 stunned guests sitting at her newly furnished table, contemplating the ruins of Candace's life. A life built entirely on lies, cruelty, and a profound underestimation of the quiet woman she had so carelessly abused. 3 months later, the city shimmered before Eleanor, a dazzling tapestry of lights and skyscrapers. She stood on the expansive balcony of her new penthouse apartment, a magnificent 2,000-square-foot luxury space that offered breathtaking panoramic views. A gentle breeze lifted the soft silk of her robe, and a profound sense of peace, of utter contentment, settled over her. This was her new life, vibrant and unburdened. From the state-of-the-art kitchen, she heard the gentle clatter of pans. Sophia, her new housekeeper, was preparing breakfast. Fresh fruit, artisanal pastries, and a perfectly brewed cup of Earl Grey tea. It was a simple tableau, yet it symbolized so much. Eleanor, for the first time in decades, was being served, not serving. She was nurturing herself, rather than constantly pouring her energy into others who had taken her for granted. She reflected on the profound transformation. Not just financial, but a complete reclamation of her dignity, her independence, her very self-worth. That humiliating dinner party, the sting of Candace's slap, Daniel's silent complicity, it had all been the catalyst, the spark that ignited a fire she never knew she possessed. The aftermath of that fateful evening had been swift and, in many ways, deeply satisfying. Many of the dinner guests, mortified by Candace's behavior and genuinely shocked by Eleanor's revelations, had reached out with apologies and expressions of horror. Some had even called to offer support, recognizing the quiet strength Eleanor had displayed. She had made a few new, genuine friends that night, people who valued her for her intelligence and humor, not for her perceived subservience. Daniel, red-eyed and humbled, had appeared at her door the next morning, looking utterly broken. He stammered apologies, swearing he hadn't known the full extent of Candace's plans, admitting his cowardice in not standing up for her, in letting Candace convince him his mother was a burden. Eleanor had listened patiently, her heart aching for the boy she had raised, but her resolve unyielding. "Sorry doesn't undo 3 years of damage, Daniel," she had told him, her voice calm but firm. "Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you sat silent while your wife slapped me at my own dinner table in my own home." He had pleaded with her, begging to go back to how things were. Eleanor had simply shaken her head. "No," she had stated, looking him directly in the eye. "And more importantly, I don't want to." The words had carried the weight of years of unspoken hurt, of a bond irrevocably broken by neglect and betrayal. Within 2 weeks, Daniel and Candace had moved out, their once grand aspirations now reduced to a small, nondescript rental house across town. They took only their personal belongings, leaving behind Eleanor's new furniture and the echoes of their ill-fated ambitions. Eleanor had felt a profound sense of relief as the last of their things were carted away. With Mr. Harrison's expert guidance, she sold her old house for an impressive $950,000, boosting her net worth to over $4 million. The sale wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a psychological liberation. The house, once a source of comfort, had become a prison of burdensome memories. Now she was truly free. Her days were now her own, filled with pursuits she had long deferred. Mornings began with invigorating yoga classes, followed by visits to art galleries where she indulged her love for beauty. She enrolled in university lectures, broadening her mind, eagerly soaking up knowledge. A lively book club brought intellectual stimulation and new friendships, and she had even started Italian lessons, planning for a dream trip to Tuscany. Evenings were spent as she pleased, sometimes enjoying an elaborate meal prepared by Sophia in her penthouse, other times dining at the city's finest restaurants, always elegantly dressed, exuding a quiet confidence that was both striking and genuine. She was no longer just a passive observer of life, but an active, joyful participant. Jonathan Harrison continued to manage her portfolio, calling periodically with excellent news about her growing investments, a stark contrast to her previous worries about stretching her meager Social Security check to cover basic expenses. In one such call, he mentioned Daniel. "Mrs. Morrison," he began cautiously, "Daniel has been in touch. He seems to be in some legal trouble with a new venture, and he was hoping, well, that you might be willing to offer some financial assistance." Eleanor's response was immediate and firm, devoid of malice but resolute. "Please tell Daniel that I wish him well, Mr. Harrison, but that he needs to solve his own problems. My responsibility to him, as his mother, ended the day he allowed his wife to disrespect me in my own home." Looking in the mirror now, Eleanor didn't see the timid, elderly woman she once was. She saw an elegant, confident, and radiantly happy woman, her eyes sparkling with life and a newfound peace. She was no longer afraid of judgment, no longer seeking validation from others. She knew with unwavering certainty that she was enough, exactly as she was. Her transformation was not just about revenge. It was about the profound recognition of her own inherent worth.